Hey, good evening. My name is Bill Cimino from the Cross the Line Foundation, and this evening we'd like to welcome you to this month's Amelia Island Museum of History's Third on Third event. But before we get started, I'm going to ask you to silence your cell phones so they're not going off for the presentation.
Billy, I can't find mine.
Now on to tonight's program. You're about to meet three local veterans from Nassau County who recently participated in the Veterans History Project. Also with us tonight is Peggy Bolger, one of the founders of the project at the Library of Congress. Peggy was the director of the Folk Life Center at the Library of Congress and is now the secretary of the museum's board of trustees. So, Peggy in the back.
Interviews at that time. Now 24 years later we have 121,000 interviews. Oh, wow. That is great. And our museum was one of the first small museums to really come on board.
The History Project was brought to our museum in 2006. The project is a collection of oral histories told by veterans from World War II through enduring freedom. These stories are recorded, documented, and placed on the museum website, then sent to the Library of Congress to be shared and archived on their database. The Amelia Island Museum of History has conducted over 200 interviews. Currently, the project is spearheaded by Isabel Bornegault, the curator at the museum. The Cross the Line Foundation also helps with the project and has currently conducted over 40 veteran interviews over the past 2 years. Tonight's panel will be hosted by myself and Paul Lorre, co-directors of Cross the Line Foundation. Now let me introduce our veterans. Since the midnight ride of Paul Revere 250 years ago this evening, our nation has been involved in conflicts at home and abroad. Like many of the men and women residing in Nassau County, the three gentlemen with me tonight, Jim Duda, David Roeser, and Jeff McDowell, have served our country admirably and have been invited tonight to share their stories of service to our great nation with you. First, let me introduce Jim Duda. Jim is from Fulton, New York, and a graduate of Hartwick College in 1968. He enlisted in the Marine Corps after college, then went on to Officer Candidate School. He served as a U.S. Marine officer in the infantry from 1968 to 1971. His first assignment was with Mike Company, 3rd Battalion, 26th Marine Regiment, as an infantry platoon commander, where he led 45 Marines for 6 months, conducting daily patrols and nighttime ambushes in direct contact with MVA and Viet Cong forces. He was then promoted to the elite 1st Reconnaissance Battalion, where he led numerous long-range patrols deep inside enemy territory. These patrols of 6 men lasted 5 to 7 days, playing hide and seek with the enemy in the mountains of North Vietnam. Well, with this unit, Jim earned a Bronze Star with a V for Valor and a Presidential Unit Citation. Jim mentioned how almost every day of his 13 months in Vietnam were direct combat situations. During our initial interview, Jim shared with me a photo of a tiger that attacked a fellow Marine officer's recon team while awaiting extract from a long-range patrol. Jim said that his first concern was with the enemy, followed by poisonous snakes, centipedes, alligators, and now a tiger. Add this to his list of scary things to worry about. Upon leaving service, Jim spent the next 20 years working in the telecommunications industry, serving in numerous sales and marketing positions. He eventually retired to Fernandina Beach with his wife, Karen. Jim claims he still refuses to work on November 10th, the Marine Corps birthday, and November 11th, Veterans Day.
And I've got the honor of introducing David Roeser. David is from Canton, Ohio, and he served in the U.S. Army from 1967 to 1970. And then he went on to serve in the Coast Guard in 1976 to 1977. He served in the country of Vietnam in numerous campaigns and did visit numerous cities in country. Dave also received the Bronze Star, and he received 2 Army Commendation Medals. David was promoted to the rank of sergeant while serving with the 159th Assault Support Helicopter Battalion as part of the 101st Airborne Division. After his first year, he extended for 2 more 6-month tours in Vietnam. He swears he spent exactly 2 years, 2 months, and 9 days in Vietnam, but who was counting? After serving in the Army, Dave went on to serve in the United States Coast Guard, again in 1976 to 1977, before finally leaving the service in 1977. After his honorable service, he went on to a 25-year career in the insurance industry as a claims adjuster, eventually retiring to Florida and then moving to the beautiful town of Fernandina Beach.
And our third guest, Mr. Jeff McDowell, was born in Missouri but raised in South Florida. He served 20 years in the U.S. Navy from 1991 to 2011, just like his father, who served as a submariner during World War II, and his brother, who served before him in Vietnam. Jeff's time in service encompassed Operation Desert Storm, the Global War on Terror, and Operations Enduring Freedom, where he spent wartime deployments on aircraft carriers throughout the Persian Gulf. Jeff spent time on several ships, including the USS Carter, USS John F. Kennedy, and the USS Eisenhower. His career took him from Tokyo to Hawaii to Norfolk to Diego Garcia in the Middle East. At one point, while based in Hawaii, Jeff served on a special task force assigned to the UN to travel to Vietnam and Cambodia to repatriate remains of soldiers who did not make it home. This duty involved about 7 trips back and forth to Southeast Asia. He even met and worked alongside then-President Clinton in Hanoi as a White House photographer. Jeff's communication skills earned him the assignment as petty officer in charge of media operations on both the USS John F. Kennedy and USS Eisenhower. After 20 years of service, Jeff made his way back to Florida, where he was retired in Fernandina Beach. On that note, now on to our questions and answers. We're going to sit down and they're going to tell us a little bit about their stories, and then you guys will have a chance to also ask some questions when we're done. So we're going to start off. David, can you tell us a little bit about growing up in Canton, Ohio, and why you decided to join the Army in 1967?
Yes, Bill. I had kind of an idyllic childhood in Canton, Ohio. Actually, it was North Canton. Have any of you have a Hoover sweeper? It's the home of the Hoover sweeper. I used to walk by the factory every day on my way to school and that type of thing. But it was really kind of an Ozzie and Harriet existence at that time. I always enjoyed the little town and that, but I was also very glad to get away from it. As far as joining the Army, my father kept urging me to join the Navy. Now, I don't swim very well, and there's about 2 oceans and a lot of other straits and things, so I decided to go see the Army recruiter. And he made me a very good offer. He offered to make me a spy. And since I was an aficionado of James Bond, I thought that's perfect. I will become a spy.
You're still waiting for your DB7.
I am indeed, yes. They fitted me my Beretta and my tuxedo, but unfortunately I didn't have much use for it in Vietnam.
What a beautiful response. All right, Jim, this one's going to you. So the same question to you. And why did you choose to go to Marine OCS after college and not any of the other branches?
Well, first I noticed that there's some former Navy people in the audience, so I'll try not to use polysyllabic words out there. Polysyllabic. Well, like Billy said, I'm originally from Fulton, New York, which is right dead center in the middle of the snow belt area of New York State. So when the time came to go to college, I was more than happy to get out of there. But
Where'd you go?
Hartwick College, Oneonta, New York, right near the Cooperstown and the Baseball Hall of Fame. And why did I join the Marine Corps? Well, at that time, it was during the height of the Vietnam War, with all the protests that were going on, you know, the burning the draft cards and the trash in the streets and taking over colleges, sort of like what happened here a few months ago. But at that point, I didn't want to, I knew I was going to be drafted. I was 1A through college, had a deferment, and draft board told me, as soon as you get out of college, we're grabbing you. And I said, geez, with that going on with the draft, and the revolution going on, I said, you know, I want to be with a group that's at least a volunteer unit. And that's why I joined the Marine Corps.
Jeff, your turn. You were 28 when you enlisted. Knowing that your father and brother both served, why did you feel that the Navy was the best fit for you?
Good afternoon, everybody. Kind of a late bloomer, I would have to say. My mom would agree. My decision to join the Navy was primarily based on an opportunity that I didn't know existed. My friend at the time, who was wanted to be a pilot, he wanted to learn how to fly helicopters on his step to becoming a commercial pilot, and he thought the Army was the answer. We were both the same age, and he came home one day, he goes, you know, you've got a handful of college degrees, you're 28, probably not going to be a professional surfer, so why don't we try to apply ourselves? And you have a communications degree, and they have a broadcast school that the military runs, the Department of Defense runs. And I really did actually want to be a broadcaster, so he went and enlisted in the Army and became a helicopter pilot, and I went right next door to the Navy recruiter, much to the astonishment of my parents and my family. I joined on the premise that I would get to go attend this Department of Defense Communications School based around broadcast, TV, and radio. So that's what we did. We shot to Great Lakes, Illinois in the dead of winter, which was quite a surprise from South Florida. And about halfway through boot camp, Persian Gulf Desert Storm 1 breaks out. And I knew at that point that probably joining the Navy was probably a pretty good idea, because the Navy doesn't have really much operations in the middle of a desert, so I thought, what's the worst that can happen? So it kind of took off from there, actually. So I joined, and I managed to get into that school, and I managed to qualify for the broadcast program. And then I managed to get on the radio in Tokyo, which was really quite the hoop, I must say. So that was the beginning.
Wow. Now, Jeff, hold on to that mic. Hold on to that mic. We'll start. We're going to start with you. Okay, so the next question is going to be for each and every one of you, but we'll start off with Jeff. Can each of you tell me about your initial training in the military, and what was the hardest thing that each one of you had to adapt to?
Being north of Chicago in January, really an eye-opener for me, having lived in South Florida most of my life. By benefit of being 28, it actually paid a lot of dividends, and I'll tell you why. When you're 17 years old and people want to tell you what to do, you go to boot camp and they want to tell you what to do and how to fold your socks, and there's a lot of young people that are like, I'm not doing it that way, I'm going to do it my way. And it creates all sorts of drama. When I was 28 and I joined and I rolled into boot camp, they could have told me to stand on my head. I'm like, let's do it. Let's stand on my head. I'll do whatever you want to do. So the training was just a matter of shutting down my world and doing what they asked me to do. Nothing more, nothing less. Sailed right through it. And the guy, the Navy equivalent of the drill sergeant, was actually younger than I was. So that guy, he kind of pulled me aside one day, and he's like, look, dude, I don't know quite what your story is here, but I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on you necessarily. I got about 60 knuckleheads that are, a lot of them have never brushed their own teeth before. I'm going to worry about those. So I kind of sailed right through it, but I lost 28 pounds in boot camp, and I was convinced when I got home that somebody had let all my pants out as a joke. I just couldn't believe it. It went by, and I was that big around when I got done. So that was pretty much the climate in Chicago boot camp. It was pretty much the toughest for me.
Nice, Jeff. And, go ahead, Jeff. Why don't you grab the mic and...
It's on.
Am I on?
You're on.
You're live. Live.
Boot camp, yeah, that was fun. When I went to college, the first 3 years I was there, I played varsity baseball. And I figured my senior year I was going to play varsity baseball. The lacrosse coach got a hold of me and said, "I understand you're going into the Marine Corps." I said, "That's correct." He goes, "Well, I was a former Marine Corps drill instructor." He goes, "Now I'm going to tell you what boot camp is all about and why you should play lacrosse." I said, "I have never played lacrosse in my life." He goes, "We'll give you a big stick and you can run around and hit people with it." I said, "Hey, what's not to like about that?" So that's what I did. I ended up playing lacrosse and running around the field, hitting people with a stick. But when I got to boot camp, I was in incredible shape. I really was. And I probably was the only knucklehead in the 249-year history of the Marine Corps who actually enjoyed boot camp. I did. I enjoyed the challenges of it. You never knew what's going to happen. The next day, as far as what we're going to go after, it was just a good experience. I even liked the food. I mean, the grits not so much, but I got used to it. Yeah, that's great. But the tough part about all honesty was I was a poli-sci major, history minor. I love sports, I love to read. And for the 12 weeks of OCS, we were in the cocoon. I mean, we knew nothing was going on in the world. And it was strictly, instead of reading a good history book, I was reading, the operational manual of an M16 and all the weapons of destruction. So that was a challenge there. So that was it.
I'm waiting for the movie.
They've already made it.
Okay. Really, basic training was pretty easy for me. I didn't get yelled at too much, but also I was one of the shorter fellows in the company, and I could always hide behind the tall person. Making the bed was no problem. My mother taught me how to square those sheets up and bounce quarters off them. But the hurry up and wait really got to me. It was like, oh man, I've got 8 weeks here and we're standing here in the cold in Kentucky. Nah, I didn't care for that a whole lot. But it prepared me for the rest of Army life. Hurry up and wait.
Yeah.
All right, David, this question's back at you. So, Dave, you started out in the crypto communications field, but ended up serving in the military police, even spending time as an M60 door gunner in Vietnam. Can you tell us a little bit about this transition and why the career shift during the war?
Well, the communication center specialist, I was supposed to work at an embassy. I was going to be a cryptographer. That's what the recruiter told me. I had it in writing. Needless to say, that did not work out well. I did go to crypto school, and they taught me, coding and encoding, decoding, that kind of thing. I graduated in February of 1968, and 150 guys in my class, we all passed the test, and 148 of us immediately got orders for Vietnam. The idea of being a cryptographer, one fellow did go to Japan, and one fellow went to Germany, and the rest of us reunited at Cam Ranh Bay and Da Nang and other places. Weren't you in my class? Oh, yeah. So that made that first transition easy. Being a small fella, they tried to find a unit to put me in. They sent me to an artillery unit, and unfortunately I was smaller than the shells they were finding. So they passed me up the line. I ended up going to a trucking company, transportation company, and I didn't know how to drive a stick shift. So that saved me there. But I finally ended up at a helicopter company that was forming just outside of Way, the city of Way. Of course, we heard about Way on the news every night. I thought it was called Hugh. And when they said you're going to Way, I thought, oh man, God, I'm not going to Hugh. But it was a helicopter company, and I really fell in love with the helicopters. We had the gunships, of course, the Hueys, and but we also had the CH-47 cargo helicopters, and I didn't have much of, since I was communication trained, They put me on a switchboard, telephone switchboard for a while, but they also needed people to fly on the helicopters as gunners. So they showed me how to operate an M60 machine gun, which was a lot different than a typewriter or a helicopter.
More dangerous.
Did that for a while, and that most of my first year, my next 6-month extension, they put me in the generator section, operating an electrical generator, so the camp had power. Didn't care for that much. Smelled like diesel fuel all the time. But then finally, my last 6 months, they put me in MP detachment. And again, I weigh 108 pounds, I'm 5'4", but I had a lot of big guys around me, and it really helped. So I enjoyed that the most. Guys, break up the fight. Guys, stop this vehicle. Guys, so that's how I ended up in the MPs.
Another great response. All right, this question is going to go to Jim. And I love this one here. Leadership question. So Jim, you jumped straight in as a Marine lieutenant, infantry lieutenant. Can you give us a little bit about how you felt on your first arrival into Vietnam as a new lieutenant?
Well, when I first got to Vietnam, infantry platoon commander would normally have 45 Marines under his control. I was introduced to my platoon, there was 24, and I asked where the rest of the Marines were, and obviously they were out of commission, so to speak. But I'll tell you a quick 7 days in May type of story. I was in San Francisco getting ready to go to Vietnam, sitting there with a bunch of buddies having a beer with them, and finally get off on the plane, go to the plane, fly to Anchorage, get to Okinawa, 2 days in Okinawa, doing all the paperwork, getting 8,000 shots in the hip, things like that. And then word came out, any lieutenants who were in Okinawa sent to Vietnam, we needed lieutenants. Jump on the plane, go to Vietnam, land at night, night flares going off, rockets going by outside the Da Nang, you can see traces going off into the mountains. And that's when you said to yourself, you know, boy, oh boy, what did I get myself into? And so the next day we're at Division Rear, where they said you're going to be moving off to 26th Marine Regiment, the next night 26th Marine Regiment. Here's your platoon, you're going out on patrol tonight, ambush night. Well, we did, and I told the Lance Corporal who was taking the patrol out, I said, look, that's my first night here, but you've been here a while. I'm going to let you run this. He said, I was going to suggest we do that, sir, because I know exactly where we're going, what we're going to do. There's a thing called a combat action ribbon that's awarded to Marines who basically get shot at. Well, that night I earned my combat action ribbon. So that 7 days in May, I went from a nice little bar in San Francisco into the exciting world of Vietnam.
Thank you.
It was also like it on the way home, too.
Jeff, this one's for you. So Jeff, you served 20 years during several different conflicts on several different ships. What would you say was the most significant duty you had during your time in service?
Sea time was always a bear because I was kind of put in a situation. I knew I'd be going to sea. I was obviously in the Navy, and at the end of 20, I had 9 years and 11 months of sea time, and it presented a whole host of challenges. But when you're on an aircraft carrier in a wartime environment, your life compresses down to like 80 feet in one direction and 40 feet in the other direction and the flight deck, and you're living underneath a very, very busy airport. Essentially, it's really full of danger, and there's bombs and there's fuel and there's refueling and there's all sorts of emergencies and drills. And even though that was a challenge of running and still having a job to do on an aircraft carrier where you got really junior sailors and you have to keep an eye on them because they don't know where to walk, they don't know what to do. They're getting hurt and they're literally walking into wings like in a hangar bay. They'd be talking to their buddy, walk right into a wing and damn near take their head off. It had a bunch of challenges, but for me, the most I think the most interesting thing that I did that presented a challenge that was the most rewarding would probably have been that tour where I was part of the unit that went to Southeast Asia to recover remains from the people that didn't return from the Vietnam War. It put such a sharp focus on what had come before. You know, I wasn't a particularly student of history, but suddenly I was traveling to Laos and Cambodia and Vietnam on a fairly regular basis from Hawaii, and the whole country was a history museum. And you got to see things. It was like they had thrown the switch and everybody left, and nobody picked up the mess. You could walk down the street and see a pile of grenades in a corner. You could be up in a mountain trail and see remnants of a helicopter upside down that had literally been there for 40 years, you know, and that's what we did. And it was so challenging because of tigers and snakes and other things, but the rewards were so high that you could call after an extended amount of time and say, hey, I think we found the remains of your father. Very rewarding, but full of challenges, but I wouldn't have changed a thing, frankly.
Thank you, Jeff.
Wow.
Paul?
All right, next question is, it's going to be again for all three of you. And we're going to start off with Jeff, and then we'll go to Jim, and then we'll end on Dave on this one. So each one of you have spent time serving our country during different periods and during different conflicts under some really stressful conditions. What did you find the most difficult thing about serving during wartime? And Jeff, we'll start with you.
The difference between my life when I was not on deployment versus being on deployment was so great that I dreaded anything having to do with going to sea on an aircraft carrier. I had a pretty good life going, even when I was in the Navy, but when it came time to go, after September 11th, for example, I was living in Bahrain, in a great apartment in Bahrain, and I could see Saudi Arabia from my living room window, and I come home from I just went to the pool and hung out a little bit. I put on CNN, and there's planes flying into the World Trade Center, and within an hour they're saying all these people are probably Saudi nationals, and I'm looking out the window going, oh shit, this party's about over. So literally within 2 weeks I had flown to New York, walked in the rubble, got it on me, and then I went to Norfolk and hopped on an aircraft carrier, and we were the first battle group in the Persian Gulf. The separation and maintaining your focus and staying safe in an environment like that was the biggest challenge for me.
Well, the most difficult part was casualties. Like I said earlier, as a Marine Corps platoon commander, I had 45 Marines under my control. I mean, the Marines entitled me, let me run these 45 Marines. Those Marines had mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and wives, and they also trusted me to take care of their Marines. So when casualties came about, it absolutely ate me up. I mean, it ate me up big time.
So if I can get through this, echo Jim's comments here. In my unit, we were changing camps, and one of the things we had to do was move all the classified documents that the unit had from the battalion headquarters. Being a crypto man, I got to move the crypto safe. Now it weighed 2,000 pounds. We were trying to put it up on the back of a 2.5 truck. It slipped, and it fell on my foot, and it crushed my foot. That was the fun part. They sent me to the hospital, the aid station. They wanted to take my toes off and part of the foot, but I persuaded them not to. But leads me to the hard part. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks there, and I was one of the lucky ones because I could perambulate. I had a cast on my foot and a few things, but I could get around. But the other fellows that were coming in, just breaks your heart. Just eats you up. And I'm sitting there with a crushed foot, and that was the hardest time. I never went back to the aid station again. I never flew on a helicopter dust off taking the wounded back. Just too painful. So,
All right. Well, David, this question is for you, and you might have kind of covered some of it in your previous responses, but you did spend a lot of time flying in helicopters as both a radio man and a gunner during Vietnam. What was it like flying while being shot at?
I love the flying part. It was shooting at you was kind of a surprise for me. I wondered where all those bullets were coming from. Usually the helicopters were so noisy you really could not hear a lot. You had the helmet on and the earphones, and but you began to see daylight coming through the floor of the helicopter, and you thought, I didn't notice that hole there before. And then you realized there was one up above in where the motor is. That was kind of challenging. But did I answer that well enough?
You covered it.
Yes, you did, Dave. And all of you, again, thank you. Sometimes the questions are difficult, and Jim, this is probably another one of those that is very difficult. So you spent 13 months in the field on ambushes and patrols, and some of them were as long as 7 straight days. Would you be willing to share some of the experiences with us, and with respect? If you don't, we definitely understand.
I'll just talk about prepping up for a patrol. When time to go up for a patrol, like a reconnaissance patrol, 6 or 7 Marines, as opposed to infantry where I'd head to 45. So anyhow, so we go out on a recon patrol. We called into S2 intelligence, military intelligence, the oxymoron. But they would give us a grid square. They give us a map to say, okay, in the 6 or 9 grid squares, that's your area of operations. That way nobody would get confused. So if you see anybody walking around out there, they're not going to be fellow Marines. They're going to be NBA. So made it very clear, very easy. So after we get our mission, I'd go back, select the Marines I wanted to have go with me. Then we go through the training for the objectives for the patrol, what we're going to do, how long we're going to be out there, all that good stuff. Make sure we had all the right armaments. We'd all stand up there and we'd say, okay, here's our M16. Here's the number of magazines we're going to carry. Here's where your first aid kit goes on your body. Here's where you'll carry flares. Here's where you carry hand grenades. And everybody had to be the same. Because if something happens at night, you don't want to go and, hey buddy, where'd you keep your first aid kit? Things like that. So everybody had to be prepped on what everybody was doing. Even to the point where everybody had to know what the operational radio frequencies were, as well as the backup radio frequencies. Even food, we'd have to make sure everybody was carrying enough food, because most of the times on a 5-day patrol, you carry one small can of sea rats for your meal, because you want to load up on weapons. I would much rather carry 4 or 5 extra magazines full of rounds as opposed to an extra can of Korean surplus sea rats. So, yeah, and we were inserted by helicopter, extracted by helicopter, and I'll tell you an exciting extract story here in a minute.
All right, Jeff, back to you. Jeff, you mentioned that the most intense period of your career was on wartime deployments in the Persian Gulf. Can you tell us what life was like on the ship during these periods? And I think you kind of answered that already.
Yeah, I can add a whole bunch to it. There's a lot of dimensions, but aircraft carriers are very, very, very dangerous places. In fact, probably one of the most dangerous environments that you can find yourself in the Navy. When I hear these gentlemen's stories about losing comrades and all, and the unfortunate byproduct of warfare, I'm reminded about all the young guys that I used to hang out with on the mess decks that worked on the flight deck. I spent time on the flight deck, but I wasn't a flight deck crew member, and not a week went by during war operations. We do flight ops where somebody would either get hit by a plane, or the wire would snap and kill somebody, or they would miss the wire and go right off the nose of the aircraft carrier. And those were sons and daughters. And one of the things that, one of the tools in my chest that got me through 20 years of Navy, and more importantly, the 9 years of sea time, was to try to really emphatically tell the junior people that worked for me, you have to be careful. I know I sound like your mom and your dad, but so-and-so boatswain mate just had his head taken off because he walked into a helicopter, you know, and I know you're tired and you work hell of a long hours and you have camera gear to be responsible for, but my God, man, you know, there's a lot going on and a lot can go bad instantly. And it did. And it was a real drag when I had to come up with a ceremony and have photographers go and photograph what's left of a body that had, you know, got cut up on the flight deck and killed. And we had to communicate to their parents. Sometimes we buried them at sea, sometimes they flew them home. That was a component that I just kind of put in a box, focused on my job, and got through it. But you can't imagine the amount of danger on a flight deck on an aircraft carrier. That's fuel, bombs, jet engines that you can't see until you walk into the jet wash, and it'll just blow you up. I mean, it'll just burn you up. You can get sucked into an aircraft, you can get killed on the ass end of an aircraft, and every time I spent time up there, I always admired very much the young people that did the flight deck operations for hours and hours and hours and hours. And you know, it was just, that for me was the most intense.
All right, next question. And I think for the audience there, what's so critical from these three men is their display of answering very difficult questions from an astounding leadership posture. Thank you, guys. So this next question is for both Dave and Jim. You've both earned the Bronze Star serving our country in Vietnam. Would you mind sharing what led to these honors? And we're going to start with Dave first and then go over to Jim.
I wondered about that when they gave me the award, because it was, I did bring the citation with me, but it covers about an 8-month period. But we were heavy in my first year operations. Indeed, we were flying Marines in and out of the DMZ area on operations. They were using our helicopters, the big cargo helicopters. And one of the things they had me do, since I was a communications specialist, was to take a radio jeep up and communicate with the helicopters and the Marines as to where they should land and pick up the troops and take them out. We had a number of rocket attacks and things in that period, and it was just a very difficult time for the Marines, for the Army, everybody up there. So they really, in the citation, didn't tell me what I earned it for, but it was for serving in that period, and no V for Valor, nothing like that. Since I was with the Marines, I thought it might have been because I had to eat Marine chow for about 3 months. That was too much of a torture.
Try eating it for a year.
There you go.
Okay, so one day I decided to take a nice walk in the woods in Vietnam. Nice sunny day, 110 degrees, 110% humidity. And I was with the squad size patrol at that time. Squad is about 13 to 15 Marines, so we're taking a nice little walk through the countryside when we encountered a significantly larger group of Viet Cong, NVA. Couldn't tell really who they were because they were shooting at us so much we had to get down and get out of the way. We were trying to disengage from them, but those suckers just wanted to grab us, and we were in an intense firefight. Fortunately, we were able to pull back into a nice little defensive position, and I started calling in mortar rounds from our company to tried to get them to break away. Well, they said, no, hell, there's a 60 millimeter mortar around, something wrong with those. So we did call in 81s. And ended up calling back the battalion rear for the 105s to come in and then bring in gunships. Finally, the gunships coming through there with all the machine guns working away, got them to break off. And that's the story of a nice walk in the day.
Jeff, I'm getting all your questions.
Bring it.
Jeff, you not only had the opportunity to return to Vietnam to help bring back some of our soldiers home, but you also had the opportunity to work directly alongside the President of the United States while on this mission. Can you tell us a little bit about this opportunity?
This is one of my favorite stories, actually. I was stationed in Hawaii, where the joint unit that would go to Southeast Asia was home based. Camp H.M. Smith on top of a lovely mountain, beautiful view of Pearl Harbor. I wasn't stationed at Pearl. I was pretty thrilled because it wasn't sea duty, it was shore duty. So I'm sitting on the beach in Waimea Bay, you know Waimea Bay, by myself on my day off, and my cell phone rings, and it's somebody claiming to be from the White House Communications Office. I'm about 3 beers in, I'm like, okay, come on. Yeah. They go, no, really, President Clinton and his family will be taking a tour to Vietnam to normalize diplomatic relations, and your name came up because you spent time on ground in Vietnam, and we'd like you to be the president's White House photographer. And I'm like, come on. But yeah, I really did. So, I flew to Hanoi, and along came Mr. and Mrs. Clinton, and Chelsea was along for the ride, and they brought the Beast with them, the big Cadillac. They had, all the vehicles and the whole thing. And for 2 or 3 days, it was from sunup to late at night. Everything the president did, said, everything he did, I was basically taking pictures of him. I had the opportunity to talk to Chelsea briefly, and I said, boy, your life must be really, really something. This was not too far from the Monica Lewinsky deal. And I thought, well, I'm not really going to ask any questions, but I'm pretty sure your life is pretty amazing. She's like, dude, you got no idea. But it was really interesting, and I had some one-on-one time with the president. I didn't really care for his wife much, but that's a different story. She was kind of mean. But he was very personable, and he had kind of a Abraham Lincoln vibe to him, actually. He was very, even though it was hot, I mean, we were in Vietnam, we were in a rice paddy, he wanted to introduce himself to all the people that were digging and sorting mud, looking for teeth and bones, and he went to every one of them, and he got to know every one of them on a certain level, and it was a great photo op. But he was so calm, he was a very calm, and kind of came across as a very kind-hearted gentleman, actually. I didn't really have a beef with the guy. Oddly enough, everybody was perspiring heavily because even from the colonel that I worked with down, we're in a rice paddy, it's 110 degrees, and Bill Clinton didn't perspire. It was the oddest damn thing. I was like, I'm soaked. And this guy he's wearing like black clothes. And I'm like, can't understand it. But that was it. And it went for 3 days, and then poof, he disappeared, and that was that.
Now, hold on to this. Hold the mic because the next one's for you too. I don't know how you got 2 questions out.
Yeah, I was going to say, hold on to that mic, Jeff. And I get the honor to ask you a question. I wish I would have gotten the surf report of Waimea, but I'll take that another day. So, Jeff, you worked on 2 ships as a petty officer in the Navy in media operations. What was it like during wartime?
Well, technically it was 3 ships. I pre-commissioned a ship out of Louisiana, the USS Carter Hall. It was the ship that you see that had the hovercraft come out from underneath. That was, speaking of 110 degree days in a shipyard, fitting out a ship with no air conditioning. That was great fun. Then we went on the first deployment. And then the Kennedy, and then the Eisenhower. It's almost hard to describe the universe of living inside a ship like that. It's like living underneath a very busy airport, a very dangerous place. It was rack, office, chow hall, rack office chow hall, and quite often the rack part didn't actually occur. I actually had a hammock in my office, and I worked so much and made time fly that I would 9 times out of 10 I'd sleep in the hammock in my office, and people, it was a 24-hour cycle, and you lose a lot of weight, and you get to know people that you work with very, very intimately in those environments. People want to sit down, they want to unload, and even though you have 20 minutes for mealtime, they like, how you doing? And they'll tell you how they're doing it. Generally, it's like way more than you need to know, but that's just the nature of working in that environment. You had to put blinders on to get through it, frankly. If you just let the external pressures of being on a ship like that get to you, you would break. I mean, I had a lot of junior sailors that were escorted off the ship and had mental breakdowns because the hours, the routines, and it was always really sad to me. I look back now and I thought, being 28, 29, in my 30s was really kind of to my advantage, frankly. I think if I was 18, 19, 20 years old, never left the farm, and I was put in that environment, I would have probably cracked up as well. But just a lot of pressure. It was just a lot of pressure and fatigue.
That answer, I need that back.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
David, this one's for you. Can you tell us why you decided to return to the Coast Guard after serving in the Army? Besides one being on the water, what were the biggest differences between the two?
The water. No, I had wanted to go in the Coast Guard. In my little town of North Canton, I had to walk to school, and when I did, I walked by the post office, and the Coast Guard, of all the branches, had a recruiting poster out there. I walked past it every day during the school year, and I thought, man, this is neat. And I wanted to get into the Coast Guard, but they wouldn't take me at the time. They were full up, but the Army was more than happy to get me. But I decided, okay, I'll spend a few years in civilian life, see how I like it, and maybe consider going into the Coast Guard. Their job was to save lives. I really liked that option. But then I learned, they took me and treated me as a prior serviceman, so I got a little bit of rank out of it. But the Coast Guard has 3 different classifications. White-hulled ships with the racing stripe. They patrol the beaches and do the interdiction with drugs and that kind of thing. The black-hulled ships, which are the workboats of the Coast Guard, they repair the aids to navigation and stuff. And then finally, the red-hulled ships are the icebreakers. They put me on a workboat. Now, I wasn't used to work. The Army spoiled me. I didn't, and I did work, but it was a small ship. We only had a crew of about 12 fellas, and we got to know each other and our habits very intimately. Didn't like that. But the thing that clinched it was Jimmy Carter. He was elected in 1976, and I had gone in 76, and one of the first things they did was start cutting people loose. Prior service, you already served your country, fine. How would you like to go home? Initially, I turned them down a couple times, but about the 3rd time, I didn't get my school that I wanted from the Coast Guard. I didn't get the ship I wanted from the Coast Guard, and finally, the 3rd offer, I said, yeah, I think I will go home. I enjoyed the time I was in, met a lot of nice fellas, still think it's a great organization, but fit a patriotic fervor, and also I wanted to get down to Miami and cruise around in a white-hulled ship and look at the girls in the candy.
Wow, all right, that escalated quickly. Yeah. All right, so I get a great question. So Jim, we're all curious about, obviously, the tiger, the picture of the tiger. So word on out in the palace on Amelia Island and at the YMCA is that you've single-handedly stranglehold jiu-jitsu that tiger. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
You like this Tiger story, don't you? You really do. You just, for some reason, like this.
I don't know anybody
Okay.
who caught a tiger.
Actually, but there is a picture of what we're talking about up here on the table if you want to take a look later. But again, when you're on a recon patrol and you've been out there for 5 to 7 days, and the jungle and the humidity and the bugs and all that stuff, leeches, you know, you just want to get out and get home. So the day of extraction, you're down, you get to your harbor site, your extract site, as soon as you can, and you set up the defensive perimeter, and you're quiet. I mean, you hardly even breathe. You don't even roll your eyes. You want to be nice and quiet so nobody can see you or find you. Well, my good friend Lou Dougherty is sitting there next to one of his sergeants. And all of a sudden he looks up and he motions with his head, and about 40 yards away is the face of Tiger. And he said, you know, of course you're sitting there in an outward position, because again, you're in a defensive position. All of a sudden this tiger attacks. And he said that tiger went through 40 yards like a blink of an eye. He said you could not believe how fast that thing moved. Well, they opened up on him. They shot the tiger. And they kept shooting the tiger and shooting the tiger until the freaking tiger absolutely careened into Lou and this other sergeant. Actually knocked them over. So they're laying there, and this guy Lou says, I'm thinking of two things. I can't get my M16 because it got knocked out of my hands. I'm trying to find my knife, so I guess I got to start stabbing the son of a gun after a while. He goes, then I'm worried about the other Marines getting scared about the tiger, start shooting the tiger, and then shoot me. So he said, now what are we going to do? He goes, plus we've alerted every NVA soldier within 5 miles of where we are, and the helicopter bird is down the way yet. So that's the story behind the tiger. These things weigh 300 pounds. And word came out that there's going to be a POW brought down to our LZ that day. So everybody went down the LZ, and these two Marines come walking off the helicopter with a tiger on a pole. You know, they brought him home, and Sergeant Larkin won the flip of the coin to take the tiger skin, and he took it to a taxidermist. So he got, I think he said $300 to get it treated, plus extra for all the holes they had to fill in.
Thanks so much, Jim.
That's a good story.
This one's for all three of you. So, I know you all had people that you served with that significantly impacted your life. Would any of you like to share? Do you still remain in contact with any of the individuals you served with?
I'll just pass it, you guys can pass it.
Absolutely. The same guy that got me to go to a recruiter at 28 is still my best friend. He went on to become a commercial pilot just like he planned. I didn't get into radio and TV because it just didn't appeal to me at that point. But we're still sailing buddies. We travel together, we hang out together, and I have about 24 people that I communicate with regularly. One of the people that I actually kept in touch with was a name. Everybody remember Ross Perot?
Yes.
He selected a guy named James Stockdale to be his vice president. Real quick story. I volunteered to be his driver. His wife was at a conference in Hawaii, and the guy that I worked for said, "Hey, you want to drive Admiral Stockdale around?" I'm like, "Absolutely," because he'd been a POW, and I had studied all about the Hanoi Hilton. I brought my little shadow box and everything, and I told him that I had read his book, which is sitting up there, and we communicated at Christmas time until he died, actually. One of the most brilliant human beings I'd ever met. It was really a shame what happened to him during that period when he was selected to be, Ross Perot's running mate, because he was a brilliant human being, and he kind of came off like a dunce, I thought. But what an interesting guy. I mean, a retired 3-star admiral, 8 years in the Hanoi Hilton. The man had been physically broken, but his mind was unbelievable, the stories that he told. So that was very, very, I still have every Christmas card, every note from his wife, Sybil, and it was very, very meaningful for me.
Wow.
I didn't turn any buttons off.
20 minutes or something to figure it out.
Check it every time.
Okay. this is gonna really go back a ways, but fortunately I see some people about my age group. Just going back to high school. We had a teacher who taught a course called civics. And in this course, they taught you things like manners, please, thank you, excuse me, terms that are never used anymore. As well as, you know, there are laws that you have to obey to become a good member of society and things like that. And I remember this guy, and he would just put his feet up on the desk and lean back, and literally, without a syllabus or anything, just talk from the heart about what it means to be a good citizen. And why they don't do that anymore is beyond me. I could go off on a rail here and say, you know, I think every 18-year-old should immediately go into boot camp for 2 years.
Here, I couldn't
And
agree more.
I think it should be Marine Corps boot camp, to be honest with you. They can eat Marine Corps. They can eat Marine Corps food and all that good stuff. But I remember his name was Tyler, Mr. Tyler. I remember him to this day. And he was just a great guy and very impactful in what he taught me.
I've kept in touch with half a dozen of the fellas from my first year in Vietnam. Those were the ones that wrote to me more often. Sadly, there's only 2 of us left out of the original 16. Ron is not doing well in Massachusetts, but we keep in touch at the holidays. And Ron was an interesting fella from New Bedford, Mass. He was, as he was getting short, you know, your time in country is getting short. Time to go home. Got to be careful. Want to go home and see mom, dad, and your girlfriend. Ron dug his own foxhole, and he dug it really deep. Well, when the monsoons came, it filled with water. And then, of course, we had a rocket attack, and Ron ran out of the tent and jumped into his foxhole. And the water came clear up to his neck. It was really rather humorous. We laugh about that frequently. I don't think he likes that story, but he did go home, and so that's all I've kept up with in a small group. I did go to my 101st Airborne reunion and met a few of the fellows I served with, but that was 25 years after the war, and that was interesting to renew some, you know, friendships.
All right, so this last question is really a beautiful question, because these 3 beautiful men that are up here have served our country so honorably. I can't wait to actually hear the responses on these, because they're about life lessons. So just so you can think about it for a little bit, Dave, you're going to go first, then we're going to go to Jim, and a Navy term, Jeff, we're going to anchor it with you. So would each of you like to share any life lessons that you took from your time in the service? And what would you pass on to the audience here this evening?
Sure. Never trust an officer. Sorry.
That's right, Jim, we'll get him later.
Oh, and by the way, Jeff, never trust a sailor. And then finally, never trust an Army recruiter. He'll mess you up big time.
That covers it all.
Yeah, figured it out. Okay, last question. Let me put it, I'm gonna change this all around here. We were out there taking another one of those walks in Vietnam on a nice summer day, and there were 6 of us on this recon patrol. As we're walking along, I smelled cigarette smoke. Now, we're not smoking, so somebody's smoking. So we set up a quick, hasty ambush. A number of North Vietnamese walked in, just smoking cigarettes, talking away, having a grand old time. And we opened up and absolutely knocked them for a loop. kill it, let's put it that way. Anyhow, so the moral of the story of this is what, folks? Smoking is not good for you.
I told you we were going to get some life lessons.
Oh, boy. When you spend 2 decades of your adult life immersed in the military, and it's a wartime kind of scenario, because we were basically continuously at war since September 11th onward till I retired and beyond. There's a lot of lessons. I think I learned more from the Vietnam War, having studied it and walked the ground. I'd like to thank these 2 guys, because I'm like a kid with water behind my ears compared to these guys. But the lessons that I learned, partially from my time in Southeast Asia, looking for remains from the people that just simply did not come back from the Vietnam War, are that war is a terrible, terrible, messy thing. And the day that we come to the conclusion that we don't have to put human bodies in airplanes to fly over the horizon and kill people, will be, I don't want to say a great day, but in terms of humanity, it'll be a great day when we can fight wars. If we have to fight a damn war, let's not send our sons and daughters to do it. Thank God for that. The byproduct of war is that there's so many people that get injured, grievously injured, and killed that have nothing to do with guns and bullets. That was, being on an aircraft carrier, obviously we weren't anywhere near the actual fighting in Afghanistan, but, we loaded up the planes with bombs and we gassed up the planes and we, took pictures of ceremonies and all that sort of thing. But I can't tell you how precious life is. And for the people that serve in the military, they really ought to be commended, because they're every color, every stripe. Some are older, some are younger, but they're all there for the right reason, and it is an inherently terribly risky thing to do, even not in wartime, just doing operations. So my life lesson would be, I just hope we don't have to go to wars and send our sons and daughters to do it, frankly. That's all.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us tonight. It's just an honor to be sitting here with you guys and having you guys share and come down. I know some of the questions were a little difficult for some of you, but yeah, and everybody, let's give these guys a round of applause.